Billionaire had power, wealth, and walls no one could break. She had nothing, except a secret that could destroy him. One shocking night, one heartbreaking truth. What started as betrayal became a love story no one saw coming. Thrilling, romantic, unforgettable. Watch to see how trust is broken and rebuilt. From the outside, Cole Whitaker was living the American dream. At just 35, he wasn't only a billionaire, he was a legend. A self-made tech mogul who built an empire out of nothing but code, vision, and sleepless nights. The media loved him. Magazines printed his face on every cover. Talk shows begged for interviews. Investors followed him blindly. And his home? It sat high in the snow-brushed hills of Aspen, Colorado, a stunning glass mansion overlooking the quiet woods below. Every wall was transparent, but his heart remained a fortress. Clean lines, modern art, quiet halls. His world was flawless, sterile, and painfully empty. On paper, he had everything. But late at night, as the wind brushed past the tall pine trees, Cole sat by the fireplace with a glass of untouched whiskey, wondering why it all felt so hollow. He wasn't lonely because he lacked people. His phone was full of contacts. He was lonely because he no longer knew who he could trust. Cole had been burned too many times. Friends who used him. Women who dated him for his money, only to leak private messages or sell stories to the press. Employees who smiled to his face while stealing behind his back. His heart had learned the art of silence. Trust wasn't just rare, it was something he no longer believed in. That's why, when his longtime housekeeper retired and suggested a young woman named Grace for the job, Cole barely glanced at her resume. "As long as she does her work and keeps quiet," he muttered. "I don't care who she is." But over time, Grace became impossible not to notice. She didn't wear makeup or designer perfume. She didn't sneak photos of his home or snoop in his private office. She moved like a whisper, delicate, efficient, present, but never imposing. She spoke with soft kindness, always using sir, even when he told her she didn't have to. But what struck Cole most was her eyes. They were deep green, with flecks of hazel, and carried a sadness that felt far too familiar. He often caught her staring out the window during breaks, watching the horizon like it was calling her somewhere she couldn't go. He once left a $100 bill on the kitchen counter, a small test he hated himself for. The next morning, the bill was still there, untouched, with a note that read, "Sir, you dropped this. Grace." It was the smallest gesture, but it shook him. She was different. Unlike the world that constantly pulled at his wallet or reputation, Grace seemed untouched by greed. She didn't flatter him. She didn't fake laughter at his rare jokes, and she didn't seem to care that he was worth billions. One night, as he passed the hallway and heard her humming softly while folding towels, he stopped in his tracks. The tune was gentle, sad. It made his throat tighten. Who was she really? And why did it feel like, in a house full of walls and silence, Grace was the only real thing left? Still, he kept his distance. He reminded himself of the rules he lived by. Don't get personal. Don't open up. Don't let anyone in. But something in Grace's quiet presence made those rules start to feel old, tired, like walls waiting to fall. Even the staff noticed. The chef once joked, "Boss, you smile more when she's around." Cole brushed it off, but deep down he felt it too. She never tried to impress him, and yet she did. In just 2 months, Grace had done the impossible. She hadn't just cleaned his mansion. She began to sweep away the dust from his heart. But neither of them knew that everything was about to change. It was supposed to be just another night, another attempt by Cole to find someone worth his time, someone who didn't just see dollar signs when she looked at him. He had taken a model out to dinner, someone the tabloids claimed was real and grounded. But by dessert, she had asked how many cars he owned, how big his private jet was, and whether he knew Leonardo DiCaprio personally. Cole didn't even finish his drink. By 9 p.m., he was back in his car, the bitter cold of the Aspen air crawling against the glass, his jaw clenched in frustration. Another waste of time. Another reminder that he didn't belong to anyone, and no one belonged to him. His driver dropped him off, and he waved the man off, wanting to walk the last part alone. The fresh air helped clear his head, but his heart remained tight with a loneliness that had no name. Inside the house, everything was silent, too silent. The lights in the hallway were dimmed. The fire downstairs was out. Only a single golden glow from upstairs peeked through the railing. Assuming it was the hallway light left on, Cole headed up the glass staircase, his footsteps soft against the polished wood. He reached his bedroom door and pushed it open without thinking, and froze. Standing in the middle of his room, her back partially turned, was Grace. Naked, completely, utterly naked. Her clothes were piled near the foot of the bed. Her hands clutched each other nervously, and her shoulders were trembling, but not from the cold. She turned slowly to face him, her expression caught between guilt and terror. Her eyes shimmered, not with shame, but with something more complicated, something deeper, regret. Cole's stomach dropped. His voice came out sharper than he intended. "What the hell is going on?" He stepped back out of instinct, his mind racing with 100 wild, impossible explanations. Was she drunk? Hurt? Had she snapped? But Grace didn't scream. She didn't rush to cover herself or make excuses. Instead, she looked directly at him, her voice low and steady. "I didn't have a choice," she said softly. "I had to do this." Cole stared at her, stunned. The woman he thought was quiet, composed, maybe even innocent, now stood in front of him, exposed in every possible way, speaking in riddles that made no sense. He grabbed the nearest blanket from the chair and held it out toward her, turning his gaze away like a gentleman, but his heart was racing. "Put this on," he said quietly, almost hoarse. She wrapped herself quickly, her eyes never leaving his face. The silence stretched, heavy like a storm cloud waiting to crack. "What do you mean you had to? Who made you do this? Why?" Cole's voice trembled with anger, but also confusion. He didn't know what scared him more, the thought that she was dangerous or the thought that she was in danger. Grace walked slowly toward the bed and sat at the edge, her hands gripping the blanket tightly against her chest. Her voice, when she spoke again, was barely above a whisper. "I was sent here, not to clean, but to set you up, to get something on you, something that could ruin you." Cole's throat tightened. "Sent by who?" "Maxwell Crane," she said, the name dropping like poison into the room. Maxwell Crane, the corporate snake who had been trying to destroy Cole's company for years. A man who played dirty, sued over nonsense, and threatened employees to flip sides. He was cruel, and now, apparently, desperate. Grace's next words came out in a rush, her voice cracking under the weight of her own confession. "He offered me $200,000 to seduce you, to get you to sleep with me. There are hidden cameras, in the vent, in the lamp, in your closet. I know it sounds insane, but it's all real." Cole stepped back, his world suddenly spinning. The woman he had begun to care for just a little had been lying to him the whole time. His first instinct was rage. But when he looked at her, really looked, he didn't see a manipulator. He saw someone broken, ashamed, terrified not of him, but of herself. "Then why are you telling me this now?" he asked, voice raw. Her lip trembled. She looked up at him, her green eyes filled with a storm of emotions. "Because somewhere along the way, I stopped being able to go through with it." Cole said nothing. His world had just turned upside down, but deep inside, something told him this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Cole didn't know what to feel. He stood still for a moment, trying to breathe through the weight that had suddenly wrapped around his chest. His fists clenched and unclenched as thoughts raced through his mind like a wildfire he couldn't control. Then, without a word, he turned away from Grace, walked to his closet, and pulled out one of his thick navy blue robes. He crossed the room, never meeting her eyes, and handed it to her gently. She took it with trembling fingers, and he stepped back. The silence between them pulsed with 1,000 unspoken questions. Cole sat down at the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like it held answers. His voice, when it came, was low but hard. "Start talking." Grace wrapped the robe around herself, her eyes fixed on the corner of the room. She swallowed, but the words refused to come easily. They stuck in her throat like thorns. Finally, she said it. "I wasn't here to clean." She closed her eyes, letting the sentence hang in the air like a confession. "I was sent here to destroy you." Cole's entire body tensed. His fingers curled into the comforter. The words echoed in his ears, louder with every repetition. "Destroy you, destroy you, destroy you." It wasn't just betrayal, it was war. He turned to look at her, eyes sharp. "By who?" Grace's gaze dropped to the floor, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maxwell Crane." The name was a punch to the gut. Of course it was him. Maxwell Crane, his oldest rival in the tech world, a man so obsessed with taking Cole down that he'd once spent millions sabotaging a product launch just to tank Cole's stock price. He was ruthless, cold, and apparently now playing dirtier than ever. Cole's voice grew harsher. "So what was the plan? Get me drunk? Get in my bed? Leak a video to the press? Plant bugs in my office?" Grace winced at the coldness in his tone, but she didn't try to defend herself. "Yes," she said, her voice shaking. "That's exactly what it was." Cole stood, pacing the room like a caged animal. Betrayal burned through him, but beneath it something else stirred. Pain. Not because she had lied, but because part of him had already started to believe in her. He stopped suddenly and turned to her. "Then why are you telling me now? You could have kept going. I walked in on you. Your plan almost worked." Grace's eyes welled with tears. But these weren't the fake, dramatic tears of a manipulator. These were honest, silent tears, falling one by one down her cheeks like apologies made of salt. She stepped forward, slowly, cautiously, like someone stepping through a minefield. "I didn't expect you to be—" She paused, trying to find the right word. "Human." Cole blinked. Grace continued, her voice cracking with emotion. "I came in thinking you were just another arrogant billionaire. Cold, heartless, someone who stepped on people to get to the top. That's what Crane told me. That's what I believed." She looked up, eyes pleading for understanding. "But then I watched you." Her hands fidgeted nervously at her sides as she kept talking, faster now, like a dam finally breaking. "I saw how you treated your staff, how you looked people in the eye, how you said thank you to the gardener, how you worked late into the night without ever barking orders at anyone. You didn't flirt with me, you didn't try to impress me, you just saw me." A tear slipped down her cheek and she wiped it away quickly. "No one's ever seen me before." The word struck Cole right in the chest. "I tried to stay on task," she admitted. "I told myself to keep doing the job. But each day I came here, it got harder to lie. And then you left your phone in the kitchen one day. I had a chance to go through it. I almost did. But I couldn't. That's when I knew. I couldn't finish what I started." She took a step closer, her voice softer than ever. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't expect it. But I had to tell you. I couldn't keep pretending." Cole stared at her for a long time. The storm inside him hadn't passed, but somewhere in the middle of it, something began to shift. Here she was, standing in front of him, not perfect, not innocent, but brave enough to tell the truth when she had every reason to run. He should have been furious, and he was, but somewhere beneath the anger, there was something else growing, a feeling he hadn't let himself touch in years. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, someone could change. Someone like Grace. Someone like him. Cole sat on the edge of his bed, his hands resting on his knees, fingers locked tightly together as if holding himself in place. His chest rose and fell in slow, steady breaths, controlled but not calm. He watched Grace with cautious eyes, still unsure of what to believe, but somehow he wasn't asking her to leave. Grace stood just a few feet away, wrapped in the robe he'd given her. Her hair was slightly messy, her face flushed from tears. But her voice, when it came again, was clear and real. She slowly walked to the armchair beside the fireplace and sat, folding her legs under her like a child seeking comfort. Her eyes didn't meet his yet, but her voice filled the room with a kind of quiet sadness that tugged at the soul. You want the truth? She asked softly. Not the part about Maxwell. The truth about me. Cole gave a slight nod, still silent. She took a deep breath. I was born in a trailer in eastern Kentucky. Dirt road, one stoplight in the whole town. My mom left when I was 8. My dad, well, he stayed. But I sometimes wished he hadn't. Her fingers twisted in her lap as memories clawed their way up. He was mean, but not drunk mean. Just bitter, angry, always angry. At the world. At the government. At city folks. At anyone who didn't look or sound like him. She looked up, her voice hardening. And he hated people like you. Cole, rich, smart, successful. He said your kind were snakes. That you stepped on real people to get ahead. And I believed him. Because that's all I ever heard. Cole didn't interrupt. His jaw tightened, but not in judgment. In empathy. Grace continued, her voice softer again. We never had much. Some nights, just peanut butter on stale bread. I wore secondhand everything. Christmas was a dream, and heat in the winter was a luxury. I used to think people like you didn't even feel cold. She smiled bitterly at her own words. When I turned 17, I ran. Took a bus with $20 and a half-dead phone. I didn't have a plan, just wanted to breathe. Air that didn't smell like diesel and resentment. I slept in shelters, waitressed, got fired, got hired, lived in a car for 4 months. Then I heard about a housekeeping agency in Colorado hiring live-in help. She looked over at him, eyes glassy but strong. It sounded like a dream, a clean bed, real pay. I didn't even care who the boss was until they told me the name Cole Whitaker. He raised an eyebrow. She nodded, answering the question in his mind. That's when Maxwell found me. He knew where I came from, knew I was broke, desperate, said you were the devil in a nice suit, said I could get justice for people like my dad. He told me, play the role, be invisible, get close, use his trust against him. Her voice cracked and she swallowed hard. But then I met you, and it messed everything up. She stood slowly and walked toward him, her movements tentative as if waiting for him to flinch, but he didn't. You weren't what I expected. You didn't look down on me. You didn't even really look at me at first, but you treated me like a human being. You said please and thank you. You held the door open. You asked if I needed time off when I got the flu. No one's ever done that for me, Cole. Not even my family. He felt his throat tighten, his voice buried beneath emotion. Grace stopped just in front of him now, hands gently clutching the robe. I started watching you, not because I had to, but because I wanted to understand why someone like you could be kind to someone like me. A tear slid down her cheek, but she let it fall. I realized something important, she said, voice steady now. It's not rich people who are the problem, or poor people, or city people, or country people. She took a breath. It's hate. Hate is the problem. My father hated people he never met, and I almost became just like him. Her voice cracked and she swallowed hard. But then I met you, and it messed everything up. She stood slowly and walked toward him, her movements tentative as if waiting for him to flinch, but he didn't. You weren't what I expected. You didn't look down on me. You didn't even really look at me at first, but you treated me like a human being. You said please and thank you. You held the door open. You asked if I needed time off when I got the flu. No one's ever done that for me, Cole. Not even my family. He felt his throat tighten, his voice buried beneath emotion. Grace stopped just in front of him now, hands gently clutching the robe. I started watching you, not because I had to, but because I wanted to understand why someone like you could be kind to someone like me. A tear slid down her cheek, but she let it fall. I realized something important, she said, voice steady now. It's not rich people who are the problem, or poor people, or city people, or country people. She took a breath. It's hate. Hate is the problem. My father hated people he never met, and I almost became just like him. The words hit Cole like a whisper that shouted in his soul. For a long moment, neither of them said a word. There was nothing left to explain, just the raw truth sitting between them like a wounded animal. Finally, Cole spoke, his voice low and rough. Why didn't you run tonight, after I walked in? Grace's answer was simple, but powerful. because I couldn't run from who I was anymore, and I didn't want to lie to the one person who made me feel like I mattered. The room felt warmer somehow. The storm outside was still silent, but inside, something new had started to grow. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of something that might just change everything. The fireplace crackled softly, casting warm flickers of amber light across the bedroom walls. Cole hadn't said a word in nearly 5 full minutes, but it felt like hours to Grace, who stood frozen in the center of the room, her breath shallow, her heart pounding against her ribcage like it was trying to escape. She had just laid everything bare, her betrayal, her pain, her past, her truth, and now she waited for the fallout. Would he scream? Would he call the police? Would he toss her out into the freezing night and never look back? She braced herself for any of it. She had nothing to cling to except honesty, and that had never saved her before. But then, Cole stood, slowly, quietly. His eyes didn't flash with rage. His fists weren't clenched. He walked toward her with a strange calmness, like a man who had just made peace with something he didn't fully understand. And then he said it. "Stay." Grace blinked, unsure if she'd heard correctly. "What?" she whispered. He took a deep breath, then repeated it, firmer this time, but gentler too. "Stay, Grace." She stared at him, stunned. I don't understand. I lied to you. I put your entire life at risk. Why would you let me stay?" He stepped closer, his voice steady, grounded in something far deeper than forgiveness. "Because you told the truth." A beat passed. "Because you had the courage to stop." Another beat. "Because you could have ruined me." But you didn't. And in a world like mine, where loyalty is bought, where lies wear designer suits, that kind of bravery? He looked into her eyes. "It's priceless." Grace felt something rise in her throat, raw emotion, something between disbelief and hope. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. Cole nodded. "Maybe not. But neither did I. When I got my second chance." He paused. "We all have something to make up for." For the first time since the night began, Grace sat down. Not because she was exhausted, but because her knees simply gave out beneath the weight of kindness. She didn't cry, not this time. She just closed her eyes and let the warmth of something unfamiliar settle in her chest. After a long silence, Cole walked over to his desk and pulled open a drawer. He retrieved a black leather folder and turned to her. "I want to offer you a job," he said. Grace looked up, confused. "What? I thought you said stay." He smiled slightly. "I don't mean as a maid." She blinked again. Cole opened the folder and handed her a set of papers. "I want you to work with me as my personal ethics advisor." Grace's mouth parted. "I don't even know what that means." He chuckled softly. "It means I need someone I can trust, someone who knows what it feels like to be powerless, someone who won't just chase profit, but will ask the hard questions. Who are we hiring? Are we paying fair? Are we exploiting anyone without realizing it?" He added gently, "You know what it feels like to be ignored. I want someone like you making sure we never do that to others." She stared at him, speechless. "And before you say no," he added, "I'll pay for whatever education or training you need. You're smart, Grace, smarter than most of the executives I've fired." It was too much kindness, too much belief. But she didn't run, not this time. She nodded slowly, heart pounding, a strange new feeling stirring in her chest. Belonging. The very next day, Cole made his move. With Grace by his side, though behind the scenes for now, he gathered all the evidence she'd shared. Hidden camera placements, emails from Crane's assistant, messages with digital signatures. He handed them over to a trusted journalist friend from a major national outlet. Within 48 hours, headlines exploded. Crane Corp caught in corporate espionage scheme. Billionaire rival uses coercion, blackmail, and failed takedown attempt. Whistleblower Maid exposes tech sabotage scandal. Maxwell Crane's empire began to fall like a house of cards in a windstorm. Lawsuits, government investigations, sponsors pulling out. His stock tanked overnight. And Cole, he didn't gloat, he didn't throw parties. He simply stood at the glass window of his mansion one quiet night, hands in his pockets, and watched the lights of Aspen flicker in the distance. Grace came to stand beside him. Neither of them said a word. But in the silence, everything had changed. Not because justice had been served, but because two broken people had found the courage to rebuild. Together. 12 months passed, quietly, beautifully, and with a kind of growth that couldn't be captured in headlines or dollar signs. Grace was no longer just the quiet maid with downcast eyes. She had become a woman transformed. She moved out of the guest quarters into a small cottage nearby that Cole insisted on building for her, a private space, hers alone. She accepted it with grace, but only after insisting she would pay rent. He smiled at her fire. That spark, that strength. It was why he had believed in her from the start. During the day, Grace threw herself into her new role, ethics advisor to one of the most powerful tech empires in the world. She sat in meetings, reviewed contracts, challenged long-standing decisions, and more than once asked questions that made millionaires uncomfortable. At night, she took online college courses, communications, sociology, nonprofit management, sometimes falling asleep with textbooks open in her lap and coffee stains on her notes. Cole noticed. He never pressured her, never offered handouts, but every so often he'd leave encouraging notes on her desk. "Proud of you? Don't let the suits intimidate you. You already belong here." Slowly, the mansion that once echoed with emptiness now hummed with purpose. Grace filled rooms with light, not by changing the decor, but by changing the energy. And it didn't stop there. One winter morning, Grace knocked on Cole's office door, nervous but determined. She had a folder in her hand and an idea in her heart. "I want to start a foundation," she said. Cole looked up from his laptop. "What kind?" She took a deep breath. "One for kids like me. The ones stuck in forgotten towns. The ones who grow up surrounded by hate, told they'll never matter. I want to give them what I never had. A real chance." He didn't say a word for a moment. He just stood, walked over, and wrapped her in an embrace. The very next week, paperwork was filed. The Grace Initiative was born, a nonprofit organization aimed at giving young people from broken homes, impoverished communities, and racially divided neighborhoods access to education, mentorship, and emotional support. The foundation grew fast. Donors lined up, not just because of Cole's name, but because of Grace's story. And 1 year after the night that changed both of their lives, they stood together on a stage at a national leadership summit in San Francisco. The crowd included CEOs, students, senators, and survivors. The room buzzed with anticipation. Grace wore a simple, elegant dress. No diamonds, no designer label, just confidence. She stepped back as Cole took the mic first, scanning the crowd, then glancing back at her. He cleared his throat, then spoke. "A year ago, I found myself betrayed by someone I thought I could trust. But instead of destroying me, she did something far more powerful. She showed me the truth." The room fell silent. This woman didn't come from money. She didn't go to Ivy League schools. But she walked through fire and told the truth anyway. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. He turned to her, his voice gentler now. "Grace didn't change my business. She changed me. Not by being perfect, but by being brave." There was a pause. Then the room erupted into applause. Not polite clapping, not just admiration, a standing ovation. As the crowd stood and roared, Grace felt her eyes fill. But she didn't hide it. For once in her life, she let the world see her, fully, fiercely, unapologetically. And standing beside her, with his hand resting gently at her back, was Cole. Not as a boss, not as a billionaire, but as a man who had finally opened his heart. Later that evening, they sat on a rooftop terrace, watching the city lights blink beneath them. Cole handed her a glass of sparkling cider. No words, just a quiet toast. To the future. To truth. To love, in its slowest, strongest form. "I still can't believe I stayed that night," Grace whispered. Cole smiled. "And I still can't believe you chose to tell the truth." She looked at him, her eyes soft. "Was it worth it?" she asked. He nodded. eyes never leaving hers. You were worth it. In a world that often divides by class, color, and circumstance, Grace and Cole's story became more than a headline. It became a lesson. A lesson in forgiveness, in courage, in seeing the soul before the surface. Because love doesn't care where you're from. It only cares who you choose to become.